Let's get back to our top story. The United States and Russia reach a groundbreaking deal. They've agreed on a framework to disarm Syria of its chemical weapons arsenal. It's a move that, for now, averts a looming U.S.-led military strike. Well, joining us now with more on this is Neil Monroe. Neil's a White House correspondent with the Daily Caller, and he joins us from Washington. Neil, thanks for taking time with us this morning.
I'm delighted to.
At first blush, this deal seems to have a lot of open ends on it, and I guess the most open end of this whole deal is the fact that Syria has signed on with this convention to adhere to the chemical weapons from the UN. Does that mean they're trying to forestall any further action from the U.S. and Russia?
Correct. And the underlying issue here is the war. Who's going to win the war? Is it the Syrian government or the various Islamic jihadi rebel groups? That's the key question. Everything's subordinate to that. And so the deal today keeps the U.S. Air Force from getting involved for some time, but it doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't actually guarantee that the weapons will be destroyed or blown out to Russia because there's no real enforcement mechanism. Part of the deal between the U.S. and Russia is a statement that says we're not going to be using force for this deal. So theoretically, the Syrians sign the deal, and then they declare, well, there's a civil war going on. We can't carry out our end of the deal, or it'll take an extra couple of months, or give us another year. And suddenly, it never gets enforced. Yet, the Syrian government would, in effect, keep its weapons and would win more time to kill off the Islamists and the jihadis that are attacking us. So we don't know. There's another issue. There might be side deals buried in this bargain with the U.S. and the Russians. For example, the Russians do not want Americans to supply weapons to its Syrian government. Do we know if the U.S. government said, okay, as part of this deal, we won't send more weapons to help the rebels? There's many ways this deal can collapse or never be really implemented. And there's many ways in which the U.S. win or lose, depending on what happens in the next year or so.
Is this about saving face for the Americans and to a great extent? Look, their president went on the docket and promised action against Syria. Something had to be done. Is that something being done?
Well, probably. The president doesn't understand the Middle East. He uses only a few advisors, as we can make out, to tell him what's going on in the Middle East. He set this policy in his office just like he set Libya policy, the Egyptian policy, and Turkish policy, all of which are not successful. And so, in this context, the president got himself tangled up in this. This deal gets him out, minimizes his political losses, and allows him to return to his true love, domestic politics and expanding government. But we don't know the price. It may be that the deal removes chemical weapons from Syria, and then the Syrian government collapses in a year or two. And then that counts as a victory for the president because he wants the rebels to win in Syria. On the other hand, it may be a year or two from now, Americans will say, that was a terrible deal. We were made to look stupid. The Syrians kept their weapons, and they beat the rebels, and the president lost all the way around. We don't know. We'll come back in a year and a half. The president doesn't care. A year and a half is a new world for him.
Neil, one of the parts of this deal is that Chapter 7 is hanging out there, the UN Security Council authorizing the use of force. That would mean that Russia, the United States, and China would have to be in agreement. We know where Russia and the U.S. stand now if you take this deal for what it's worth. What about China?
Oh, China is following its traditional policy, allowing the other countries to fight among themselves while they concentrate on expanding their power. The Chinese are perfectly happy to stay out because they know the Russian interests are roughly theirs. Namely, they don't want Americans getting involved in China. They know the Russians will cast a veto in the UN before they need to. So there's no need for them to pick a fight with America or look busy. They're getting what they want just fine.
Neil, authoring a deal is one thing, but compliance is another. And I know you've talked about it a little bit, but should Syria fail to comply, the use of force is something that they're holding over their heads. Will we see a use of force here if Syria fails to comply?
Do you think our president, after going through this humiliation and disaster and having to crawl to Putin to save him, is ever going to threaten force against Syria? No, it's highly implausible, which means Syria, if it wants, can really come and haul, delay, prevaricate, Now, they can invent a million excuses. Saddam invented so many excuses. He kept the UN guys out for many years, and and to the end, we thought he had chemical weapons, when in fact, he didn't. Now we're going to be in a similar situation. We're going to be searching through Syria during the civil war, when the government is under pressure. Maybe the Shafiq won the war when the government has no need to help. We'll never be sure they got rid of their weapons. Well, the Russians are not going to help us. Why would they? It's not in their interest. It's really an unenforceable deal, but it gets the president off the hook and allows him to return to going after his top priorities: expanding government power, doubling American immigration, seizing the future for the Democratic Party.
Neil, I appreciate you taking time to lend your perspective to this story. Thanks for this.
Oh, delighted. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. That was Neil Monroe, White House correspondent with the Daily Caller, and he joined us from D.C.